Hey everybody, I'm Joe. We're talking about the Marvel Multiverse game today, and we are going to be discussing the rules for concentration. Here we go. One thing that is beloved inside of many TTRPGs is concentration effects. That is to say, an effect that persists over time, but the counterbalance to this persistent effect is that one character must hold concentration on it, and if they lose concentration, the effect dissipates. Naturally, Marvel Multiverse has concentration powers inside of it, but crucially, the rules for concentration are substantively different in this game than they are in other TTRPGs. So it's important to know how concentration works, how it scales with character rank, and if you are facing against an enemy that is holding concentration powers, how you can break them. The first thing to recognize about concentration powers is that concentration powers do not naturally have a duration in Marvel Multiverse. In most games, you have a power that has a duration and it has concentration. But in Marvel Multiverse, concentration is a description of duration. For instance, when we look at a power, the duration might say that it is instant, it might say that it is for a round, or it might say that it is concentration, meaning that the duration exists until concentration is broken. So there is no such thing as a power that lasts for 1 minute so long as you hold concentration in Marvel Multiverse. If it's concentration, it persists through time. That's a really crucial point because there are some debilitating conditions that can be applied with concentration, and they might last for hours as long as the character that holds concentration does not drop it, which is an important point that we'll get to in a moment on how to break concentration. The next thing to recognize about the way concentration works in Marvel Multiverse is that concentration cannot be broken simply by taking damage. Taking damage, either a little bit or a lot, is not in and of itself relevant to losing concentration. There are many ways to break concentration inside of this game, but crucially, you are unable to break it simply by doing damage. That's a really important point because in other games, every time a character takes damage, they must do concentration checks. And there's no such thing as a concentration check in Marvel Multiverse. In other games, concentration checks are where you have to roll to maintain concentration. This is usually done based on taking damage. But in Marvel Multiverse, concentration exists or something happens that automatically breaks concentration. Damage is not one of them. In other TTRPGs, one technique for being able to break concentration of an enemy is to make a lot of very small attacks. This means that the character has to roll concentration checks many times, but that strategy does not work in Marvel Multiverse. Instead, if you want to break concentration in Marvel Multiverse, you want to build a character that is able to impose one of the conditions that automatically leads to a drop in concentration. The next thing to understand about concentration in Marvel Multiverse is that it is not a one-at-a-time thing. Rather, in Marvel Multiverse, you can concentrate on a number of powers that is equal to your rank. Now, this is really powerful because you can take multiple things that require concentration and you can stack them on top of each other. For instance, if you go into phasing and invisibility, you are now invisible while you walk through walls, and you can do this as early as rank 2 in this game because it is 2 concentration powers. As you get more ranks, having more concentration abilities and thinking of the way that they mix together is a way of building a really powerful and really interesting character, and it absolutely works, rules as written. Let's go ahead and take a look at the ways that we can break concentration. And I'm going to sort this into a few different sections. And we're going to start with if your health or if your focus drop to 0. If you take enough damage that your health drops to 0, you go unconscious. And unconscious characters cannot concentrate on powers. This one is pretty obvious. So take a character's health down to 0 and they drop concentration. But of course, the combat is pretty much over at that point anyway, but it does, rules as written, break concentration. Next is the demoralized condition, which is where your focus drops below 1, so it drops to 0 or 2 negative numbers. A character that is demoralized cannot willingly spend focus, they have trouble on all action checks, and they cannot concentrate on any abilities, but they can keep going. So one thing that's actually really powerful in breaking concentration is taking somebody's focus down to 0. Most of the time, enemies have a lower focus amount than health amount. And if they want to regain focus, they probably have fewer avenues to do so. A lot of characters are going to have a power like do this all day, which allows them to spend focus in order to regain health, but they may not have a good ability to regain focus. Of course, they could do a vigilance action recovery check, and that would let them spend their action to recover focus, but that takes a full round of combat. It's also important to note here that the character might be taken down to 0 focus, and that means they can't use concentration or any power that has a focus cost to it. So it's easier to demoralize an enemy, and you are going to end all concentration and make it so they can't use really interesting powers. So this is a cool way of being able to build a character that is able to cripple enemies on the battlefield. There are a couple conditions that also immediately end concentration. The first one is being stunned. There are a number of powers in the game that impose the stunned condition. The stunned condition typically lasts for 1 round unless a power stipulates otherwise. You cannot concentrate on powers, you cannot take actions, and all attacks against you have an edge. So stunned is a pretty debilitating condition, but for our purposes, it automatically ends any concentration powers. So if you want to build a character that ends concentration on your enemies, look for powers that impose the stunned condition. The easiest ways to break concentration are to knock back a character or knock a character prone. These are relatively easy mechanics to actually impose during a fight. There's a lot of powers that can actually make it happen, and they automatically end concentration. Knocking somebody prone, of course, knocks them onto the ground. They have trouble on all melee attacks. Anybody making a close attack to them has an edge. However, ranged attacks against a character that is prone have trouble. It costs a character that is prone 1 space of movement in order to stand. For our purposes, there are lots of things in the game that can knock a character prone, and this is a great way of ending concentration on effects. Knockback is the other really great way in combat to immediately end concentration. Now, I haven't talked about knockback much on this channel, and I really should build a character around the knockback mechanic because it's a pretty cool thing, but effectively a melee character can hit somebody hard enough that they fly farther away from them. Knockback has to happen with a close attack, so this is a melee-based character. They must have at least 1 level of Mighty, and when they hit somebody and have a fantastic success, they can choose to forego special effects, including double damage, from the attack to knock back the enemy. So this is the forced movement inside of Marvel Multiverse. For every level of a damage multiplier that you have when you have a knockback effect, you can hit somebody back 5 spaces, so 25 feet. At very high levels, you can knock people back significant distances and throw them into or perhaps through walls, which is very cool. For our purposes, if you have a melee combatant, you can choose to do knockback under certain circumstances and immediately end concentration. If you are a melee combatant and you have a fantastic success, you do have to choose between any of the attributes of a fantastic success, even above and beyond double damage, and forego them in order to knock back the enemy. This is usually not worth it, but if they have a concentration power that is up, it is absolutely worth it to end concentration on that ability. There are 3 more times that concentration is immediately broken. If you blind a character and the power they are concentrating on requires line of sight, concentration is broken. If you deafen somebody and the power they are concentrating on requires them to hear a target, concentration is broken. And if you paralyze somebody and the power they are concentrating on requires a melee or agility check, concentration is broken. These last 3, imposing blindness, deafness, or paralyzation, are the hardest to use. They're the ones that are dependent on the type of power that the person is concentrating on. If I have somebody that is concentrating on an effect that does not require line of sight and I blind them, I have done nothing to affect concentration. Though this still might be debilitating for them for other actions and powers, it's not relevant to our conversation. If I wanted to build a character that reliably ends concentration for my enemies, I would focus on knocking somebody back, knocking them prone, stunning them, or demoralizing them. The first three are great on a melee character build where I'm going to be able to run in and hit somebody and perhaps be able to knock them prone with an effect, or be able to hit them and apply knockback, or have a power that imposes the stunned condition upon a fantastic success. I'd have a lot of options with a good melee character to be able to end concentration. Alternatively, I could build a character that demoralizes somebody in order to end concentration. This takes longer to get to, but it is a really fantastic way of making sure that they don't use additional interesting powers or apply new powers that have concentration mechanics. If I want to demoralize somebody, there's a lot of strategy to do so. Additionally, attacking focus is easier than attacking health. You are going to have somebody who has less focus than health. Characters willingly spend focus in order to engage in a fight, and most characters do not take the uncanny powers, which have a reduction on the amount of focus that is depleted from an attack. Uncanny is the focus version of the sturdy powers, which have damage reduction against health attacks. Anyway, that is concentration in Marvel Multiverse. Make sure you understand it to build a character that has incredible concentration mechanics, or understand it so that you can break the concentration of your enemies. YouTube is literally made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them. I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.